It was a Saturday evening between 6:30 and 7:30 p.m. I think it was. I was driving home from taking an incredibly long drive. Anyway, there was this road called Walnut Gap Road. Now on this road, there's a blind curve next to an old abandoned white church in which I always slow down before driving around the curve, just to make sure nobody was going to come flying around the corner that night. Right as soon as I do that, there's a 6-foot ledge on the left side of the road where some small trees have fallen over, whereas on the other side of the road there's a steep hillside that has a path cleared through the thick underbrush where deer like to hide in. Just as I slowly drove around the corner, I saw this thing step onto the road on all fours. When I first saw it, I thought it was a 500-pound male black bear, because it was roughly the same size as one, and we do tend to have a few roaming around where I live now. But then I noticed that it was actually more like a wolf, because it had a long bushy tail, pointed ears, a canine-like snout, and the same body shape as a wolf, with jet black hair and glowing amber-colored eyes. By the time it stepped onto the road, the wolf turned its head towards my direction and stared right at me. I was ecstatic at first to actually see a wolf in the wild, but at the same time I realized there was something rather off about my encounter. There shouldn't be a wolf out there this big. In fact, the more I think about it, there shouldn't be any wolves here in West Virginia anymore since the timber wolves that once lived here were killed off. Was the state government secretly using conservation efforts to repopulate wolves here in the state? Did a pack of wolves escape from a wildlife sanctuary and somehow find their way here? If so, then how did this one get so freaking huge? Not only did the wolf's abnormal size catch my attention, so did the look in its eyes. They looked different from what I see in the eyes of any canine I know of. They looked much more intelligent than anything I've ever seen. Whatever theory I've had to support any rational explanation for this unusual sighting were immediately shot away when this creature did something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Something that still haunts my soul to this very day. When we both stared at each other, even while I'm inside my car, I heard what sounded like bones popping loudly, and to my absolute shock, I watched this wolf place its hand on top of my car hood, raise itself off the ground, and stand up on 2 legs. Yeah, you heard me right. It wasn't a paw it placed on my car hood, it was a hand. When the wolf stood up and my headlights hit it square on, that's when I got a really good look at it. It was easily 8 feet tall and weighed approximately 600 to 650 pounds or more. As I said, it was covered in jet black hair that seemed quite feral in my opinion, as if it hadn't been cleaning himself that much. And it had a long bushy tail and 2 glowing amber yellow eyes. To my shock, it was more than a wolf standing on its hind legs. It had a human-like torso from the waist up, appeared pretty muscular with broad shoulders and long forearms, longer than those of a normal human being. I could see the muscles from this quote-unquote wolfman pulsating with each breath it took, especially in the headlights. It also had these dexterous hands that looked almost like raccoon hands, but with more elongated fingers and long jet black claws at each fingertip. They looked like they could be used to easily manipulate any kind of prey in its clutches, and they looked like they could easily rip me to shreds, or maybe they could do more than just that. The hind legs resemble more like those of a dog or a wolf. This I can easily tell because they were bent backwards and had these massive paws for feet, and from the looks of which it was standing on its toes more than on its feet. It had a massive head similar to that of a wolf or large German shepherd, but bigger in proportion, with pointed ears and tufts of fur at the tip of each ear, as well as a long muzzle with these great big fangs gouging out at the front of the snout. To be honest with you, the fangs had a very eerie resemblance to those of a smilodon or saber-toothed cat, but the rest of it looked just like a werewolf. But the eyes were the one thing. The only thing about my encounter that night that I'll never forget. And even writing about it to you, all right now, sends a bone-chilling fear down my spine. As I've said to you prior, the eyes looked extremely intelligent. Far smarter than any animal that I've ever come to know in my neck of the woods. But they also gave me a feeling of evil. Finally, I gained this overwhelming sense of dread after seeing it walk to my side of the car on two legs, slowly bend down to level its eyes with mine, and I froze in pure, unadulterated horror when it used its hand to jiggle the door handle to try to open my car door. Fortunately, all the doors in my car were locked, and every window wasn't open, but this still horrified me to a point where I actually couldn't even breathe. This quote-unquote wolfman, as I previously referred to it as, gave out a grunt and actually frowned at me for a few seconds before standing back up and walking to the other side of my car, and it jiggled the other door handle adjacent to the passenger side. Whatever this thing was, it was intelligent enough to know what a doorknob, or in this case a door handle, is. At this point, I was absolutely shaking in my driver's seat, with that same fear still latched onto my soul. Have you ever been through an experience in your life where, even though you've known all your life that you're an apex predator, you find yourself going out into the wilderness alone, and you suddenly find yourself so weak, so helpless in the eyes of such a beast like this? That's exactly how I felt at the time of my encounter. I felt like this thing, a creature that shouldn't even exist, yet it was standing right there in front of my car, was the true ruler of the forest, and we humans were nothing compared to what it could really do. It could have easily ripped the doors off my car and pulled me out of it. It could have caught me up if I tried to escape. And even if I tried to scream for help, it wasn't going to help me, because I knew how powerful this predator was, even if I don't know it yet. Just by looking at this wolfman, I knew a human being wouldn't have stood a chance against it. And I knew that it knew that I knew. I honestly thought that I was going to die that night, that my family and friends would never see me again, that they would never know that I was about to be killed or eaten alive by something that no one believes existed, and that there was nothing I could do about it. However, none of that ever happened to me. It was as if God was watching over me that night, protecting me from the malevolent beast that was circling me. Instead of attacking me head-on, the wolfman bared its teeth and let out an extremely deafening snarl before walking around the front side of my car and crossing the road on its hind legs in just 2 steps. The encounter didn't end there. By the time it crossed the road, it paused for a couple of seconds before it slowly turned around and looked at me one last time. As soon as it did that, I could have sworn right there and then that it wasn't alone. I looked over its shoulders and I could see multiple pairs of eyes staring directly at me. I knew they were the same creatures as the first one because they held the same eye shine and gave off the same growls too. I estimate that I saw at least 5 other pairs of eyes staring at me. 3 of them were low to the ground on all fours. The other 2 were standing upright, but they didn't reveal themselves out of the darkness like the first one did. In my opinion, I think he was the alpha male of the pack. If you all think encountering one werewolf-like creature is terrifying enough, imagine how I felt when I saw that there was more than one creature with this one. With that scary thought, I snapped out of my trance and decided to get the hell out of there. Slamming hard on the accelerator, I bolted away and drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I'm not pulling your leg here, but the distance from right where I was when I saw those things to my home, I literally arrived home and pulled into my garage in just 1 minute. By that time, I was in tears. I've never felt that scared before in my entire life, and not only that, that was the first time I've cried that much in a long time. My parents were concerned about the state I was in and asked me what happened. I basically told them everything that transpired just before I pulled in. Now, I may have made up different stories about stuff before, but that was only when I was little, and whatever I experienced wasn't a joke. I told them the truth with honesty, but terror in my voice. But of course they didn't believe me. They just assumed that what I saw could have been a black bear and driving after dark that makes your mind play tricks on you. But this wasn't a trick I saw. I was 19 at the time, and I wasn't drunk while I was driving home that night. I wasn't dreaming of this incident, nor was I hallucinating it. It wasn't even a simple misidentification. I know what I saw, and there's no doubt in my mind it was real. After this encounter, it affected me so much that I was forced to isolate myself from everyone I know, including my family and friends, for a little over a month or two. But I eventually broke out of my shell and got back into social life again. However, I took this time to do some intense research on what I saw, and that's when I came upon the Dogman phenomena for the first time. According to several eyewitness testimonies, people have reported seeing the same exact creatures all over the United States and even in some remote parts of the world. This filled me with relief, knowing that I wasn't alone, that there are people out there who swear on their lives, and even to this day, that what they saw out there was real. They're not a haunting part of humanity's imagination, like we all believe them to be. Monsters do exist in this world, and this fact alone makes us realize how small our world really is. To me, this makes me wonder that if a pack of werewolf-like creatures can exist, then what else could be lurking out there in the shadows, watching us with intelligent eyes, waiting for us to prove their existence in man's world?